The Vortexian Prophecy. Chapter 1, The Stormchild's Awakening. The sun beat down on the dusty plains of Vortexia, a harsh, windswept world clinging to life on the fringes of the Milky Way. Eira squinted against the glare, her dark eyes scanning the horizon. She was alone as always, her people a distant speck on the vast canvas of ochre sand. "Eira!" A voice, weathered and worn, broke the silence. Old Yarek, the tribe's shaman, hobbled towards her, his staff thumping rhythmically against the parched earth. "You stray too far, child," he rasped, his eyes filled with worry. The wind's whisper of change, of a gathering storm. Eira shrugged, her fingers tracing the intricate patterns of the wind-carved rocks. "The storm is always there, Yarek. It's part of us, part of Vortexia." Yarek sighed, his gaze sweeping across the endless dunes. "Aye, the storm is our lifeblood, our curse. But this is different. The winds are restless, angry. They speak of a power rising, a power that could shatter our world." Eira's heart quickened. She had always felt a connection to the wind, a strange kinship that set her apart from her people. As a child, she would often wander off, drawn by the haunting call of the vortex, a swirling maelstrom of energy that raged at the heart of the planet. "What power, Yarek?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Yarek's eyes met hers, a flicker of fear in their depths. "The power of the Stormchild," he muttered, the words heavy with dread. Eira had heard whispers of the Stormchild, a figure of legend spoken of in hushed tones around crackling fires. A being of immense power, said to command the very winds of space, destined to unite a fractured galaxy against a cosmic tempest. But it was just a story, a myth to frighten children into obedience. Wasn't it? A sudden gust of wind whipped around them, sending sand swirling in a dizzying vortex. Eira gasped, her body instinctively reacting to the surge of energy. She raised her arms, her fingers dancing in the air, as if conducting an invisible orchestra. The wind responded, swirling around her in a graceful ballet, lifting her off the ground. Yarek stared in awe, his staff clattering to the ground. "By the ancestors," he whispered, his voice trembling. "It is true. You are the Stormchild." Eira landed softly, her heart pounding in her chest. The wind seemed to hum with a newfound energy, as if acknowledging her awakening. She felt a thrill of excitement, but also a deep sense of unease. What did this mean for her people? Yarek knelt before her, his head bowed. "The prophecy has come to pass," he murmured. "You are our hope, our salvation, but you are also our doom." Eira's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Yarek raised his head, his gaze filled with sorrow. "The Stormchild is destined to unite the galaxy, but at a terrible cost. The winds will rise, tearing apart worlds and shattering empires. You will be hailed as a hero, but also reviled as a destroyer. You will walk a path of blood and fire, forever marked by the storm." Eira stared at the horizon, the wind whipping at her hair. She had always felt different, an outsider in her own tribe. But now she knew her true purpose, her destiny. A shiver ran down her spine, not of fear but of anticipation. The Stormchild had awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same. Chapter 2, A Prophecy Unfolds. The rusted starship, a relic of a forgotten age, hummed beneath Eira's feet. It was a far cry from the windswept dunes of Vortexia, a place of polished metal and flickering lights. She clutched a small pouch filled with dried herbs in a smooth stone, her only connection to her past. "Nervous?" A voice, deep and resonant, echoed through the ship's cramped cabin. Eira turned to face her mentor, a tall, cloaked figure with piercing blue eyes. He had introduced himself simply as Kiran, a name that seemed to hold both familiarity and mystery. "A little," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Kiran smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "Fear is a natural response to the unknown, Eira. But remember, the wind does not fear the storm. It embraces it." Eira nodded, her gaze fixed on the swirling nebula outside the viewport. It was a mesmerizing sight, a dance of colors and light that seemed to echo the chaos within her own soul. "Tell me about the prophecy, Kiran," she asked, her voice steadier now. "Why me? Why now?" Kiran settled into a worn chair, his fingers tracing the swirling patterns on its armrest. "The prophecy speaks of a time of great upheaval, a cosmic tempest that will consume the galaxy. The Stormchild, it says, is the key to salvation, the one who can unite the scattered stars and guide them through the darkness. Eira listened intently, her mind racing. She had heard fragments of the prophecy before, but never in such detail. It was a heavy burden to bear, a destiny she hadn't asked for. "But why me?" she repeated, her voice filled with doubt. "I'm just a girl from Vortexia, a nobody." Kieran's eyes twinkled. "You are more than you know, Eira. The wind has chosen you, whispered your name on the cosmic breeze. You have a power within you, a power that can move mountains, that can bend the very fabric of reality." Eira felt a surge of excitement, but also a prickle of fear. She had glimpsed that power, felt it coursing through her veins, but she had also witnessed its destructive potential. "I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered. Kieran reached out, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to be ready, Eira. All you have to do is trust the wind, trust yourself." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of training and discovery. Kieran taught Eira to harness the wind, to channel its energy, to bend it to her will. She soared through the skies, conjuring tornadoes and tempests, feeling the raw power coursing through her veins. But with power came responsibility, a weight that pressed down on her shoulders. She saw visions of the cosmic storm, of worlds consumed by darkness, of civilizations crumbling into dust. The fate of the galaxy rested on her shoulders, and she was terrified. One evening, as they sat by a crackling fire under a canopy of stars, Kieran spoke of a man named High Prophet Kale. He was a charismatic leader, revered by millions, but Kieran's voice was laced with caution. "Kale has learned of the prophecy, Eira," he said. "He sees you as a threat, a rival to his power. He will stop at nothing to discredit you, to silence your voice." Eira felt a chill run down her spine. She had never encountered Kale, but the very mention of his name sent shivers of unease through her. She knew deep down that their paths would inevitably cross, that a clash of wills was inevitable. The wind howled outside as if echoing her fears. The storm was coming, both in the cosmos and in her own life. Eira knew she wasn't ready, but she had no choice. She was the Stormchild, and her destiny awaited. Chapter 3. Rise to Prominence. The bustling spaceport of New Zenith buzzed with activity. Ships of all shapes and sizes docked and departed, their hulls gleaming in the artificial sunlight. Eira, dressed in simple robes that belied her growing fame, stood on a balcony overlooking the sprawling metropolis. "This is it," Kieran said, his voice a low rumble. "Your first public demonstration." Eira's stomach churned. She had spent months honing her powers under Kieran's guidance, but performing in front of a crowd was a different beast altogether. "Remember," Kieran said, sensing her unease, "the wind is your ally. Trust in its flow and let it guide your actions." Eira nodded, drawing a deep breath. She closed her eyes, focusing on the currents of air swirling around her. She could feel the energy of the city, the pulse of its inhabitants, the thrum of technology. It was a symphony of chaos, a tapestry of life. When she opened her eyes, a newfound confidence filled her gaze. She stepped onto the platform, the crowd falling silent as she raised her arms. A hush fell over the spaceport as a gentle breeze stirred, caressing the faces of the onlookers. Then, with a graceful gesture, Eira summoned a whirlwind. It danced around her, swirling and twirling, its power contained yet undeniable. Gasps of awe erupted from the crowd as the whirlwind grew, transforming into a majestic tornado that reached towards the sky. Eira held the tornado aloft, her body swaying in sync with its movements. She could feel the energy flowing through her, the raw power of the wind at her command. With a final flourish, she dispersed the tornado, sending a shower of shimmering particles raining down on the awestruck crowd. Cheers and applause filled the air as Eira bowed, a shy smile gracing her lips. She had done it. She had proven her power, her worth. But as she stepped off the platform, a shadow fell over her triumph. A holographic projection flickered to life, the stern face of High Prophet Kale filling the sky. His voice, amplified by hidden speakers, boomed across the spaceport. "Citizens of the galaxy, beware the false prophet," he declared, his words dripping with venom. "This so-called Stormchild is a charlatan, a manipulator of the weak-minded. Do not be fooled by her tricks, her illusions. The true path to salvation lies with me, with the order of the cosmic winds. Eira's heart sank. Kale's words were poison, designed to sow doubt and fear. She could see the uncertainty in the eyes of the crowd, the seeds of division already taking root. Kieran squeezed her hand, his gaze steady. Don't let him shake your resolve, Eira. The people will see through his lies. They will know the truth. Eira nodded, her determination renewed. She would not let Kale's propaganda deter her. She would continue to demonstrate her power, to unite the galaxy, to prepare for the coming storm. In the weeks that followed, Eira traveled from planet to planet, showcasing her abilities and forging alliances. She met with alien leaders, spoke to crowds of all races and creeds, and spread the message of hope and unity. Her fame grew, her name whispered in hushed tones across the galaxy. But so did Kale's influence, his shadow looming ever larger over her path. The conflict was brewing, a battle of wills that would shape the destiny of the cosmos. Chapter 4. The Convergence. The sky above the peaceful world of Haven turned a sickly green. An unnatural hush fell over the bustling city, the usual chatter of alien languages replaced by an eerie silence. Eira stood on the balcony of the High Council chamber, her gaze fixed on the swirling vortex of energy that loomed on the horizon. The cosmic tempest, a once distant threat, had arrived. It's here, Kieran murmured, his voice heavy with dread. Eira nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. The air crackled with an ominous energy, a palpable sense of impending doom. The ground beneath her feet trembled as the first shockwave of the tempest hit, sending tremors through the city. Alarm klaxons blared, their piercing wails echoing through the streets. Panic erupted as citizens scrambled for shelter, their faces etched with fear. Eira watched the chaos unfold, a knot of guilt tightening in her stomach. Was this her fault? Had her awakening triggered this cataclysm? Eira! Kieran's voice cut through the din. It's time! Eira turned to face him, her eyes filled with determination. This was what she had been training for, what the prophecy had foretold. She was the Stormchild, the galaxy's last hope. She raised her arms, summoning the wind. It responded with a roar, swirling around her in a frenzy of power. The air crackled with electricity as Eira channeled the energy of the tempest, bending it to her will. With a mighty effort, she pushed outward, creating a dome of swirling winds around the city. The tempest raged against the barrier, its tendrils of energy lashing out like hungry serpents. Eira gritted her teeth, her body straining with the effort of maintaining the shield. Hold strong, Eira! Kieran shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. Eira nodded, her eyes blazing with defiance. She would not let the tempest consume Haven, not while she had breath in her body. She drew upon the collective energy of the planet, of the people she had sworn to protect, and channeled it into her shield. The dome of wind pulsed with renewed strength, repelling the tempest's onslaught. Eira could feel the storm weakening, its fury gradually subsiding, but her victory was short-lived. A fleet of warships emerged from the swirling vortex, their hulls emblazoned with the sigil of High Prophet Kale. Eira's heart sank. Kale had not given up. He had merely bided his time, waiting for the chaos of the tempest to mask his attack. The warships opened fire, their energy blasts raining down on the city. Eira's shield flickered, threatening to collapse under the barrage. She knew she couldn't hold out much longer. But just as all hope seemed lost, a squadron of starfighters streaked across the sky, their weapons blazing. They were the allied forces Eira had rallied, the defenders of the galaxy answering her call. A fierce battle erupted, the sky ablaze with light and sound. Eira watched in awe as the allied forces held their own against Kale's superior numbers, their courage and determination inspiring her to fight on. With a final surge of power, Eira shattered the remnants of the tempest, the shockwave sending Kale's fleet reeling. The tide of the battle turned, and the allied forces emerged victorious, their cheers echoing across the ravaged landscape. Eira lowered her arms, exhaustion washing over her. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Kale had been defeated, but his influence still lingered, a poison that threatened to divide the galaxy once more. As the smoke cleared, Eira stood tall, her silhouette outlined against the rising sun. She was the Stormchild, the symbol of hope and unity, the beacon that would guide the galaxy through the darkness. Chapter 5. A Hidden Truth. The celebration on Haven was in full swing. Music and laughter filled the air, the scent of exotic spices mingling with the sweet aroma of victory. Eira stood on a balcony, watching the festivities with a heavy heart. The galaxy rejoiced, but a storm brewed within her. "You seem troubled, child." Kieran's voice was soft, yet it cut through the revelry like a knife. Eira turned to face him, her eyes filled with a newfound skepticism. "Tell me the truth, Kieran," she demanded, her voice a low growl. "The prophecy, the architects, tell me everything." Kieran's eyes widened, surprise quickly replaced by understanding. "You've seen it, haven't you?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Eira nodded, her jaw clenched. In the aftermath of the battle, while tending to the wounded, she had stumbled upon an ancient archive. It contained the secrets of the architects, the beings who had seeded the prophecy on Vortexia. "They used me," she spat, her voice thick with anger. "They manipulated my people, my destiny, all for their grand experiment." Kieran sighed, his shoulders slumping. "The architects are not evil, Eira," he said softly. "They are simply different. They see the galaxy as a vast canvas, a playground for their manipulations. They believe they are guiding us, shaping our evolution." Eira's anger flared. "Guiding us? By planting seeds of conflict? By orchestrating wars and disasters? They are playing with our lives, like children with toys." Kieran remained silent, his gaze fixed on the revelers below. Eira's words echoed the doubts that had plagued him for centuries. He had always questioned the architects' methods, their motives, but he had never dared to challenge them. "What am I, Kieran?" Eira's voice was choked with emotion. "Am I just a puppet, a pawn in their game? Or do I have a choice, a will of my own?" Kieran met her gaze, his eyes filled with a newfound resolve. "You are the Stormchild, Eira," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "You are the embodiment of the wind, a force of nature that cannot be controlled or contained. You have a destiny, yes, but it is not predetermined. It is yours to shape, yours to fulfill." Eira listened, a glimmer of hope flickering in her eyes. She had always felt a connection to the wind, a sense of freedom and wildness that defied definition. Perhaps Kieran was right. Perhaps she wasn't just a puppet, a plaything of the architects. "What do I do now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Kieran smiled, a warmth spreading through his features. "You continue on your path, Eira," he said. "You unite the galaxy, you face the challenges that lie ahead. But you do it on your terms, with your own strength and conviction. You are the Stormchild, and the wind is yours to command." Eira nodded, a newfound sense of purpose filling her. She would not let the architects dictate her destiny. She would fight for the galaxy, not as a pawn, but as a force of nature, a whirlwind of change sweeping through the cosmos. The celebrations continued below, but Eira felt a sense of detachment, of separation. She was no longer just a girl from Vortexia, a symbol of hope. She was the Stormchild, a force to be reckoned with, a whirlwind of defiance against those who sought to control her. Chapter 6. Embrace of Destiny. The wind howled around Eira, a familiar symphony of chaos and power. She stood on the precipice of a new era, the galaxy poised on the brink of transformation. In the wake of Kael's defeat, a fragile peace had settled over the stars, a tentative unity born from shared struggle. Eira's gaze swept across the gathered crowd, a mosaic of faces from countless worlds. Leaders of empires, diplomats, scientists, warriors, all drawn together by the hope she embodied. "The Stormchild has spoken!" A voice boomed, amplified across the vast plaza. A hush fell over the assembly as Eira stepped forward, her robes billowing in the wind. "I stand before you not as a prophet, but as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit," she began, her voice clear and resonant. "I was chosen, yes, but not as a pawn in a game. I am a force of nature, a vessel for the wind's will." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a mix of awe and apprehension. Eira continued, her words weaving a tapestry of hope and determination. "The architects may have set events in motion, But they cannot dictate our future, she declared. We are the masters of our own destiny, the architects of our own fate. We will not be puppets, nor will we be pawns. We will be the wind that shapes the stars. A wave of cheers erupted, a symphony of voices united in a chorus of defiance. Eira felt a surge of warmth, a sense of belonging she had never known before. This was her people, her family, her galaxy. As the celebrations continued, Eira sought out Kieran, finding him standing beneath a canopy of twinkling stars. "You did well, child," he said, his eyes filled with pride. Eira smiled, a genuine warmth radiating from her. "Thank you, Kieran, for everything." Kieran nodded, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "It is time for me to go, Eira," he said. "My purpose here is fulfilled." Eira's heart clenched. She had grown to rely on Kieran's guidance, his wisdom. But she knew he was right. Their paths had converged for a reason, and now it was time for them to diverge. "Farewell, Eira," Kieran said, his voice barely a whisper. "May the wind be with you always." With a final embrace, Kieran stepped back, his form shimmering and fading into the starlight. Eira watched him disappear, a sense of loss mingled with gratitude filling her heart. She turned back to the city, the laughter and music a distant hum. The future was uncertain, the path ahead fraught with challenges. But Eira was ready. She was the Stormchild, the embodiment of hope, the architect of a new dawn. As she raised her gaze to the stars, a gust of wind swept through the plaza, carrying with it the whispers of 1,000 voices, the dreams of a united galaxy. Eira smiled, her heart swelling with a newfound purpose. The storm had passed, and a new era had begun. The Stormchild's journey had only just begun.